Today we have a fellow coach on this podcast. His name is Michael Owen, coach and self-published author, I think, correct?
Correct. Later,
Yeah.
earlier last year.
Awesome. Book is called The Foundation, a book on how to become an authentic man. I haven't read the book yet because we connected last week and I just didn't find the time, but I'm pretty sure I'll read it. So stay with me. How
I
about
appreciate it.
you just give us a quick introduction, like what your coaching is based on, like what kind of philosophy, and maybe also like kind of insights on the book, what philosophy you're pushing there, let's say.
Yeah, I would say that I am trying to be a coach that teaches lifestyle rather than being a pickup artist or teaching routines or teaching behaviors that are designed just to pick up women. I do think that there are some things that can be learned about attraction and certain behaviors that work, but I want to help guys to work on the inner game, work on their style, work on just their overall perception of themselves, and understand the nature of how dating works, as opposed to saying a line or negging or doing some sort of gimmick in order to get a reaction. And there's tons of guys out there like that. In the world where I come from, where I started posting on Reddit like 3 years ago and in the seduction forums and other dating forums. And a lot of that stuff, even though it has its value, is geared very much towards doing X, Y, and Z to kind of win the favor of a woman. And it might be due to my age because I started on this journey about 4 years ago after a divorce. So I
Oh.
was kind of starting, yeah, I was starting in my late 30s
Uh-huh.
all over again. And I saw some of your videos about going down the incel mind frame, the rabbit hole. And to be honest, I came out of the divorce very bitter towards women and angry and was kind of lost. And luckily, I had a really good friend who had kind of gone through the same thing and who I respected a lot and had gone out through the other side. And he actually introduced me to Models by Mark Manson. And I kind of read it and just it kind of clicked for me. And it didn't have all the answers, but it kind of got me on the path that I am now.
Mm.
And I treated dating almost like an experiment, if that makes any sense. It's like I after my divorce, I was like, I am not good with women. I am not good socially. I can either get bitter about it or I can take some steps and learn about it and figure out how this works and improve myself. And that's kind of what I did. For the first year or so, I just treated it as a social experiment to learn about dating, to learn about myself. And along the way, I started writing about it. But I didn't really have an intention to really become a writer at all. But then I started just kind of being observant of how my dates went, what I did right, what I did wrong, and kind of documented that. And like I said, Models was the inspiration for everything, but there were certain parts of the book I found lacking. I found a lot of the information was just like, okay, don't be needy, be your authentic self. But I felt like in some parts of the book, it needed to be a little more specific on what you needed to do. And that was the purpose of my book, was to kind of go deeper in a lot of those subjects about inner game and your self-perception and just the ins and outs of the dating world. So that's kind of
Mm.
my long-winded answers at how I kind of got started on everything. But it was basically just trying to reinvent myself and being observant about things and then trying to share that knowledge. And it kind of just progressed from there.
I love it. I think like this kind of work. I mean, I have a focus on that too, as you might have already seen, like the name of my channel, Honest Masculinity. It's kind of
Hmm.
comes a little bit from the models too. I took the honest from the models, combined it with the masculinity from Robert Glover, and maybe like Jordan Peterson influences a bit because those were the three characters that influenced me the most. And like combine it into that brand. But I feel like that, especially in the seduction dating sphere, there's not a lot of men who have this focus on authenticity and like healthy ways of pursuing women. The most things that I see is either like this technical shit, like say this, be that, be confident. It's like how
Hmm.
can you be what kind of advice is be confident, And then you have the other ones, which are the female coaches now. Some of them are not totally shit, but I just like I know that I can't fully take dating advice from a woman, because in most
Yeah.
cases she just doesn't know how to go through the seduction process, um, and like the sweet spot in between, I would say, uh, where you have this like focus on authentic relationships. There's not a lot of men out there. I mean, you have the red
Yeah.
pill thing now too. You have the incel movement, but all of this is just toxic bullshit. And
Yeah.
I feel like when Mark Manson wrote that book about, I think the main movement back there was like the PickUp movement, and now you have like all those different things: red pill, incel. You have the
Yeah.
female dating coaches. Like there's so much stuff out there that's probably guys gonna get even more confused at this point, because there's so much bullshit input that they're getting from the internet.
I
Uh,
always say that sorry to interrupt, but I always say that no matter what you read, a book, even mine or anyone's, can only take you so far. It's your actual experience, and that's why you have to put yourself out there extensively and face rejection. So to know what rejection is like, know what success feels like, to get embarrassed, to have the highs and lows. That's the ultimate teacher. Like getting out there, experiencing, and being fucking observant about things. That's how you're going to really win. The books and the advice and everything that can set some ideas in your head and set and lay the framework for things. But at the end of the day, it's going to putting in work, experiencing some things that might be uncomfortable, and gaining experience from that, and knowing what works for you. Going back to I'm still active on Reddit in the seduction community, and I do agree with you. A lot of it's all over the place. It's Reddit, so you're kind of you're mining for gold in a sea of shit, like I like to say. But there is some good stuff out there, and I do think that there are some guys who are more grounded in reality and do see do have a realistic view of attraction and know that your grooming and your looks do matter and your inner perception matters, and just a more grounded view of things instead of, you need to neg her. And there's a lot of the terminology that's still out there, and it's gonna, I think it's always going to be pervasive and be out there, and it has its place. I mean, it's good to know about that world, but I think in the end, if you are going to be a grounded man and not kind of buy into this cartoonish view of attraction, then that's what you kind of have to do a little bit of the inner work as well, and then kind of see how the outer works.
The inner work section, interesting one, because I can remember when I was like in my early 20s, I was basically a virgin in my early 20s, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I consumed all this, like I was always on YouTube. Like I mostly watched YouTube videos, and they were like, I think the first guys were like teaching man fashion or how to beast. I'm not sure if you know those guys, but they're like more like
Yeah,
grooming style oriented. But the dating advice they give is kind of shit, I have to say, because they will say, okay,
yeah.
they will teach you things like go approach women, go talk to them, which is like 80% of what you need to do. But especially on YouTube, I find this inner work totally lacking. And then
Mm-hmm.
after I went out and I did all these pickup things, I approached women, it was a total catastrophe. And then one friend actually recommended that book, Models by Mark Manson, to me. So I read that book and Robert Glover's book, which goes super deep into like the emotional background. Like what, like, for example, I wrote Robert Glover's book and I was like, what the fuck, man? Like it,
Oh
I
yeah.
wasn't even aware of this stuff, this toxic shame underneath, feeling unworthy, feeling like a subhuman. Mark Manson calls this inferiority gap. And
Yeah.
those things you can't find on YouTube in a lot of cases. So that's also why I love that you wrote a book, because I feel like a lot of cases in books, you get higher quality information than on social media.
Yeah. And Glover's book was a huge influence on me too. I think a lot of the vast majority of problems guys have with dating is that they fall. And I am a professed recovering nice guy. And I don't know if you agree with this, but I think it's something you're never fully over. I have to constantly check myself in my relationship and in how I deal with others. It is a constant battle. It's something you don't just fully get over. You have to. The nice guy never fully dies, but I think the majority of problems guys have with dating is that it just stems from neediness and a scarcity mentality. They are terrified that this woman that they meet is their only shot at happiness, or someone who's an attractive woman, and they're terrified, so they overinvest too easily. They become needy, they become desperate, and that's where you kind of have to find an kind of an inner drive and have an understanding of who you are first. I think if you don't have a fundamental defined idea of what you stand for and who you are and how you're willing to be treated and how you're willing to treat others, your self-value is going to be derived from other people, and you're fucked, especially in the dating world. And if you don't have an identified sense of self, then you're going to be needy with women and want their validation. So I do think you can get lost in self-improvement, and you can't always hide in knowledge and developing inner game. And there's a point where you have to actually get out there and get experience. But I think a lot of it starts with just having a fundamental idea of who you are and how you expect to be treated, and understand that there are literally hundreds of millions of women out there that if you look at pure numbers alone, it is illogical for you to believe that you'll never find someone to be with. Statistically speaking, and just by going by pure numbers, there are too many women in the world for you to date logistically, if you're just put in the right circumstances. I know that sounds absurd to guys who haven't had any type of experience or have just, primarily been met with rejection, but I just encourage everyone to look at your opportunity from an abundance standpoint, because the opportunities are boundless, and guys just get into this mentality where they focus on one woman and think that woman is their one shot, and when in reality it's that's the furthest thing from the truth. It's really the world is wide open for you, and I wish more guys would view things in those terms.
That's interesting. I mean, what you said about the nice guy topic, Robert Glover says this too, that like the nice guy never fully dies.
Yeah.
I agree and I disagree with this at the same time. Like, I have been working quite hardcore on
Mm-hmm.
those things, and it had a quite intense impact on my life, to say the least. But I feel like some of the things that I dealt with in the beginning, I kind of died with time. So, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
if we talk about the honesty thing, when I read those things, there were a couple things about me that I was like so embarrassed to share with the world. I was literally
Yeah.
thinking, if people find that out, I will literally die. And once I shared them, they stopped being an issue for me. I
Yeah.
almost forgot about them. Like, you take them out and they kind of die off. So, for example, I lost my virginity to a hooker when I was 18, and
Okay.
the years later, I always just had like intercourse with prostitutes, and I never, ever, a single time said that to any, but not even my closest friends, because I was
Mm-hmm.
so embarrassed that that that, yeah, this is somehow like so bad. I'm gonna be judged as a person, whatever. Like, okay, to this day, I'm not doing the prostitute thing anymore, but I also don't look at it as like judgmental as I used to.
Yeah.
Back then, I was like, oh, you're a horrible, fucking subhuman, like dirty piece of shit. You fucked a prostitute. What's wrong with you? Like, nobody else is like this and
Yeah.
whatever. And then I actually challenged myself. So I went out and I told this to the woman that I went on dates with, right? Like on the first date,
Yeah.
radical honesty mode. You know what? I never fucked a woman who's not a prostitute.
Oh, wow.
Back then. Now things changed, but back then that was the case.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they were like shocked, or sometimes they started opening themselves up too. So I heard the most insane stories from women. It's so funny. You go into the interaction and you're like, oh my God, I'm so fucked up if I tell them that, and they're gonna be turned off. And then you actually make yourself vulnerable, and they started doing the same thing. So I had women on the first date, and they told me like, I've never been as honest to anybody in my whole life. And I was like,
That's amazing.
You're 32. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know me for like 2 hours. How is this possible? And yeah, I'm curious. Like, how were your experiences like with the honesty thing in dating?
Well, first of all, I want to ask you what were their reactions like when you would tell them? Would it kind of spark their emotions, or did they converse with you, but then it kind of died out? Like, I was wondering if that would help spark attraction, or if that kind of
I don't think
how that worked out when you told them those things.
No, attraction, I don't think so, but I think it helped build emotional connection. So, when you go into that like conversation level where things are like super flow, you have this like emotional back and forth between a woman, and like the conversation like really feels really deep and like kind of surreal at times, I would even say. If you like really go into that in that honesty thing, I felt that I had conversations on an emotional level that I never thought that to be possible. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like necessarily that the attraction went up, but the thing is that if the emotional connection went up, the intimacy goes up. I felt like they were automatically moving closer to me, like physically also, because they felt more comfortable with me. I actually told one girl, which was totally insane. I wasted way too much time on that chick, but I told her like really fucked up things about me that were super embarrassing, and she reacted in a manner where she said like, "Oh, this is super weird," and then like 2 days later, she said, "Oh, I want to have sex with you." I'm like,
well, so you got a second dates out of it, so
yeah. She went on 5 dates with me, and and then she flipped in her mind, but I killed it off with the honesty later, because I told her that I have herpes type 2 positive, and and she was like super neurotic, so she started like Googling herpes type 2, and it's like, oh my God, like it's a sexually transmitted disease. She was a virgin, so she was like super freaked out, and I was like, shit, because I already had her ready to sleep with me, and she was a 25-year-old virgin, so this was really hard to do. And then I killed it up with too much honesty, but I don't regret saying it, because it was the truth, and her choice. Yeah,
I think one lesson I learned during my dating experience was that, and yes, I do believe that you should be vulnerable with women, own who you are, and do it without shame.
Yeah.
That being said, though, I don't think that when you're first getting to know someone, you unload all your shit on them right away. I think there's a difference between being vulnerable and just unloading on someone. I think when you're first getting to know someone, I really believe this, because one time I went on a date with a woman who was, for me, it was astounding, because I was in my late 30s and she was in her mid 20s, and I was like, women in their 20s want to date guys in their 30s. This is crazy. And we went on a date, and it was great. The vibe was there, the chemistry was there, until we started talking about exes.
Ah, shit.
never go into X talk on a first couple dates. It doesn't matter if it's shared trauma or the the vibe of the date didn't necessarily change, but then our kind of dynamic changed after that. And it just eventually didn't lead anywhere because I really do think that in those early stages of dating, women kind of associate you with the feelings that you make them feel. So if you bring up exes or like heavy shit like trauma or kind of unload a lot of your kind of deeper issues on them, yes, you want to own who you are, but you have to be smart about it and do it kind of incrementally. So that being said, though, I do think that if a woman is just really into you and has a high level of attraction to you, she is going to be more open to hearing those things about you. If she's kind of neutral or not very attracted to you, she might be a little more off put about kind of the darker parts of your past. But that would be my advice: is just to be vulnerable, own who you are, and not try to be perfect. Like you don't need to project a perfect ideal image of yourself, but don't unload all your heavy shit on them too early on. It's overwhelming, and it will kind of push them away a little bit, I think. So I'm not trying to say be fake about things, but just be smart about being vulnerable. Also, having fun and doing small talk is underrated. Like I think a lot of guys feel like you have to come out hot out the gate and develop this intense bonding connection. Let that develop a little bit. Like have the smart, like flirt, do small talk, learn how to escalate physically properly with like hand touching and, you know, brushing of the shoulder, teasing. All these things are really important. It's not just everything you can do to be incredibly vulnerable in the beginning and you know, go to a level 10 of your emotional bond right away. Those things are built. So I'm kind of rambling here, but you know, just I do believe in owning who you are and your quirks and not projecting a perfect image of yourself, but also don't unload all your stuff on them right out the gate. I think there's a time and there's a way to do that properly.
That's true, but you know, the funny thing that I figured out was that when I went into this thing, like into the whole honesty development phase, which was the like in the starting phase was a nightmare for me because like those
Oh
things
yeah.
they were I considered them to be so fucked up, even though later I learned they're kind of human, you know, it's not that big of a deal. But I read this book too, and I read about Mark Manson, and he says this. He calls this emotional vomit, I think.
Yes.
So
Emotional vomiting. Yeah.
yeah, so he says don't emotionally vomit. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to tell them because I don't want to emotionally vomit to them. But then I kept on getting rejected, and I kept on having shitty conversations. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to treat it as an experiment, and I'm going to be like radically honest, and I'm going to tell them things that are probably a little bit too early. And I felt like sometimes you can't say if it's emotional vomit or if it's authentic expression. Probably like early stages that I had, there were a couple of emotional vomit moments in there, but the conversation still went better than when I wasn't honest. You know, when I was like, oh, I'm taking it slow with the vulnerability or with the things that I'm sharing with them. And I don't know, the way that I found out in the end was kind of fast physical escalation. Like you have that attraction moment and you use it to do physical escalation as quickly as possible if she's into you. You do it until she stops. Then you push back and you open yourself up and become vulnerable, make her trust you, and then she accepts all the further physical moves. Not in a manipulative way, but but like
it's not manipulative.
No, I mean
physical escalation is not manipulative in my view. It's just a tenet. It's a fundamental part of attraction to me.
I want to know your opinion on something. So I did a video where I basically just copied Mark Manson's advice, but I did copy it because I felt like it's not mentioned enough. and it's kind of working really well. And that was, if you like, don't if you're in a kiss situation, don't ask her, "Can I kiss you?" Just do it.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
video
I've
was
seen a lot of that.
that video was
I've seen that debate. I've seen that debate in the forums too.
so
Yeah.
that video was reposted by a feminist, and this guy is like the definition of a fucking keta male. Yeah, I can send you like
Yeah.
a picture later, but this guy is like literally insane. So all his following are like this radical feminists, and this
Yeah.
video got like 100,000 views. So those feminists, they come into my page, my comments, like start hating on me, and
About not asking. So you're asking if I should, if a guy should ask for permission.
what? Yeah, and what's your opinion on?
I did not. I mean, I did not, but I also read the room too. Like, you can kind of sometimes you just have to go for it, but you also can do so in a way that's respectful of their space and not being aggressive with things. And if they are just not giving you any kind of indication whatsoever that they want you to do that, then you have to be respectful of that. But that being said, I would typically, and with the woman I'm with now, I didn't ask for her permission to kiss her on our first date. I just went in for it, and but the vibe was there. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
so I'll have two kissing stories for you. One that worked in my favor and one that didn't. So one date I was on with a woman, and we went to a wine bar, and I would say the vibe was there. It was I wouldn't say it was overtly flirtatious, but we had a good conversation going. But I was at a point in my dating life where I kind of gave zero fucks and wanted to see how things went. So we were at a wine bar and at the bar, and I just, while she was in mid conversation, just went in for the kiss. And her eyes kind of bugged out in her head, and she kind of looked confused and, kind of asked me, "Whoa, okay, what was that?" And I said, "I just wanted to kiss you." The date continued on. And then at the end of the date, when we were going to our cars, she pulled me in and just started, we just started making out ravenously. If you go at it, sometimes going in for the kiss can just spark like can spark emotion in them, and it's a high risk, high reward move. But I do think just going in for the kiss sometimes has its place. My second dating story, kissing story, and back when it happened to me was very cringe, but now I look back on it with humor. But I was on a second date with a woman, and at this point I didn't really understand the concept of physical escalation. I some guys will say this is bullshit. It doesn't matter. I believe in incremental physical escalation. Like, instead of going from 0 to 10 on a date, you touch hands. Like, doing the princess handhold is a powerful move. I really believe like like physical touch with hands really sparks attraction, but like just subtle physical escalation. So we were on a date, and the vibe was good. She really even said to me during the date, like how much of a good time she was having and how much she was enjoying herself. And she even mentioned the third date. So, and I made the mistake of trying to, go to an expensive restaurant and win her favor, like the nice guy thing, buy the nice dinner and buy attraction. That's kind of, I'm still learning.
Always
So I was learning about physical, how to ramp up physically in a proper way, and also that you don't always, just because you buy the nice dinner, that you're working on some imaginary point system where they're going to want to where you're owed sex or you're owed a second date or whatever. But long story short is, we got to the car, and I just went in for it, and she kind of just like leaned back and went, "Oh, that's awkward." My eyes bugged out in my head. I was like, I was dumbfounded because I didn't know what had happened because the vibe was there and we had a great time. But sometimes I think there's a lot of factors that go into play in it. So I know I'm kind of rambling here, but I think that you should just go for it in a respectful way. Other people will say, "Yo, it's cute when you ask," and I don't think so. I think it's a little too timid. I think it's a little too timid. You don't want to like try to jam your tongue down her throat or anything
I feel like
cringe like that. But
I feel like the problem with that is that it's kind of a shitty thing to say, but it's partially the truth, is that women are attracted to perceived social status. And if you're on top of the social hierarchy, you're not going to ask. Like, you go to your job,
yeah,
your boss is higher than you in social status. He's not going to be like, is it okay if you do your report? No, he's just going to tell you to do the fucking report. And the thing is, like, yeah.
Yeah, I want to say I think that if you're uncomfortable just going for it and you want some sort of verbal confirmation or because consent is, I want to make clear, is very important, and a guy who is thirsty and forces himself is not attractive. With that caveat being said, I think if you want to get verbal consent, there's playful ways you can do it. You can say, like, say, I really want to kiss you right now. Or, just don't like say, stare at her and say, can I kiss you? Just kind of don't be so like straightforward with it. Be a little playful and a little fun with it. And just kind of, you can still be kind of a little cheeky and a little playful with it and still kind of get the same result. And she'll let you know either way. But in terms of just going in for it, that's what I used to do. And I felt like I could do that and still be respectful at the same time.
I mean, when I think about the situations when I really went into the kiss, the girl was already isolating herself with me or giving me strong signals of attractions. You don't just jump mentally to the point, like, let's kiss her, right? And this is also what I kind of find a little bit unjustified from the feminists. They come into my comments because they have nothing else to do and start hating on me. And they paint me as this guy who's just going to random women and like kisses them out of the blue. Like, of course, no, that's probably not a good idea because she's gonna run away.
No.
But if you're talking to her, she gives you very strong attraction signals, like strong eye contact. She's isolating herself with you. She's standing close to you. Maybe she's even touching you. Then asking for consent, I think, is not a good move, because I made a reaction video to this feminist where I said, if you ask a woman if it's okay to kiss her, she will say no, even if she would do it. Oftentimes. So it's my experience. The thing is, I would love to live in the world where women are like men and they're like, hey, you want to fuck? Yeah, let's go. But that's how men think. But women are like emotional. They think this second like that, and the different second they change their mind. They come to your place and then they're like, yeah, but I don't want to have sex. And then 10 minutes later, they do want to have sex. So I'm not saying it's wrong or anything, but they just behave differently when it comes to those things than men. Obviously, there's women who come to your house and they are like straight up, ready to hook up. You have those women too.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are not like this, and they have those like swingy moods going back and forth. I even had women who told me, like, they're sending me nudes, right? Like, I'm coming to your house and I'm going to fuck you right now. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm here. I'm like fucking horny and ready to go. And then 20 minutes later, she's like, I don't feel so good. I'm not coming. I'm like, but that was a Latina, though, they're especially crazy with their like mood swings, let's say.
I give this advice to guys who are cold approaching or on a date or trying to kind of ramp things up a little bit. It's just, I don't think you can ever go wrong with just if she indicates in any manner that she's uncomfortable or wants you to stop, and just completely stop and don't try to push the issue. It's not only the right thing to do, but also you don't want to get in any. There is so much room for you to get in trouble nowadays, so you have to watch yourself. And I think that if you go in for the kiss or you make a move, I don't think guys should be afraid to make the move. You have to be like guys have to push things forward. I think you would agree with that. Guys have to kind of
Obviously.
shift the dynamic forward in kind of a sexual direction. But if she says no or is uncomfortable with anything, just don't be that guy. Don't be the thirsty guy. And respect those boundaries. And if you go for it and she rejects you, she slaps you, she asks you what the hell was that, just deal with the consequences. It's part of it. And then just don't push the issue anymore. I
I
think in the vast majority of instances, if you've been doing things correctly on a date, if you've been charming, if you've had good conversation, if you've sparked emotion and attraction, then there's really it's not a crime to go in for a kiss. I mean, I don't agree with this kind of uh, viewpoint that it's like sexual assault. I mean, it's a common human interaction, and there's ways to handle it in a respectful manner.
the thing
But
is,
you also shouldn't be ashamed of wanting sex. I say this all the time. Like this is what men do. They get into on dates. They get into friend mode. Like they feel that if you have like a pleasant conversation that goes from A to Z with no teasing, no physical touch, no kind of other deep emotions that are sparked. If you're just act like a friend, you're going to get friend like results, and you have to frame yourself like a potential sexual or romantic partner. If you're too scared to make a move, you're going to get shut out. I mean, you have to be bold at some point and make things happen. Um, just being terrified of offending her is you're not going to get anywhere.
the thing is that that's what men are taught. I can remember when I went into that development phase towards physical escalation. That was my worst fear, by the way. Like approaching women,
And
asking them out on dates. I didn't have that much issue with it, but like the physical escalation, I was like, I'm gonna go to jail for fucking sexual harassment if I follow Mark Manson's advice on like
I don't think so.
push it
Yeah,
hardcore. I was with this kind of woke friend group back then, and
yeah,
there was one of those guys, and he was like, if you do that, then um you will have really strong issues and really strong problems. And I was like, okay, man, like so he had a girlfriend back then. I was like, okay, so with your girlfriend,
yeah,
how did you do it? And he was like, well, we
yeah.
went
Exactly.
we went on seven dates
Oh, seven. Okay.
before anything happened, and then she kissed me, and I was like, well, yeah, and you're trying to give me advice.
Yeah.
So yes,
Well, it's funny as a lot of people who give that kind of advice are trying to project an image of themselves and don't really follow their own advice. But physical escalation doesn't have to be like anything crazy. It could be, like I said, the hand holding or brushing up against the shoulder or touching of an elbow or a leg, like while you're laughing. To me, that's not anything that's extreme. I think that's very benign. Like if you're dating someone and if a light gesture of physical contact offends them or makes them shut down, then they might not be the right person for you. I think that most people who are open, I mean, listen, you don't want to go straight out the gate into the physical touching, but if the vibe's there, if you guys have had a good conversation, if some comfort's been established, if she sees you're not a psychopath or a creep, then some light physical touching is well within reason, in my opinion.
yeah, the thing is that I felt like that the culture nowadays is so feministic that even though that's kind of dying right now, I feel like those ideologies are crumbling apart. But
Hmm.
when I started doing this, I felt like it was peak. And I mean, you go out, there's not that clear line what is okay and what isn't until she says no. Like if she says no, if she makes it clear that she's uncomfortable, then of course, no. Yeah. But up to this
Hmm.
point, I can remember, Julian Blanc from Real Social Dynamics.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in 2015, I think it was, he went on CNN, and the controversy was there were a picture of him like chugging women against the wall.
Yeah. That was fucked up though. I mean, I think that's there's really no excuse for that
Yeah,
type of
okay,
shit.
fair enough. You can disagree with me on that, but I didn't do that to women in public either. But I had women who come home with me after 20 minutes, and I went into that dominant direction, like chugging them and being a bit aggressive. And they were telling me like, do it more, like, yeah, more violence. And
Hmm.
thinking to myself, where is the difference whether I take her home and do it in my bedroom or he does it publicly? I mean, of course, you can say, okay, certain things belong into the bedroom. Fair enough. I don't think it's appropriate to masturbate in public. But when
Hmm.
we're talking about things being morally correct or morally incorrect, why is it morally incorrect in public, but it's morally correct in the bedroom? In the bedroom, it's actually a
Yeah.
much more dangerous environment because it's isolated. The woman doesn't have any support system. In public, she has all of that. So I don't feel like that narrative really makes sense to me, because the boundaries
Um,
are not that clear.
I think there's a stark difference between what he did is with he was I don't know the whole context of it, but to my knowledge, he was doing day game or talking to someone and he was being playful and put his hand on her throat. I think that is an entirely different context between being out in public and having an interaction with a relative stranger that you just met and what is acceptable in the public sphere versus what goes on in the bedroom. I think that first of all, in the bedroom, I think there does need to be some sort of indication and not a full on discussion of what everyone's preferences and boundaries are. And it's a difficult conversation to have, but someone's preferences in the bedroom are vastly different between what they prefer there and what goes on out in public. So to a degree, I disagree with you to a degree there. I think that if someone prefers rougher sex or they prefer being dominated, um, that is kind of something that is appropriate in the sphere of the bedroom. But out in public, I mean, I couldn't imagine any type of scenario where I would feel um, warranted in putting my hands on someone. I think that's bullshit. I think that that's a lot of like weird pickup artist stuff that's been debunked over the years. And I think he rightfully was skewered over that. I think he made a comeback kind of as a self help guy,
Yeah.
but I think that kind of extreme degrading of women doesn't work. You can spark attraction without having to kind of go down that path and be a. I think guys who kind of resort to that stuff are kind of lacking something within themselves. They have they're trying so hard to get a reaction from a woman that they're throwing their ethics and throwing out their kind of dignity out the window, and you don't need to do that. And
No,
I think that kind of stuff you shouldn't kind of throw away who you are and what you believe in and being respectful of people just to be extreme and get a reaction out of people. So
that's not what I mean though, because actually when I got into this, I wasn't ever thinking about like doing this rough shit in the bedroom. And then I tried it and I felt like, okay, there's someone who are really into that stuff. Others aren't, and not all of them.
mhm.
And I just started questioning that narrative, and I agree with you that like Julian Blanc I had some incidences that were probably a little bit fucked up, but this specific incident is where I see like a certain double standard that I see in feminism throughout the whole thing. And with
Yeah.
asking for consent, it was kind of the same thing that I mentioned in my video when I reacted to those guys. And I said, like, okay, you're telling me as a rule, like they go even further than you, right? They're like, okay, you have to ask for consent at any point. And I'm like, well, if you make this a rule and I start touching her, like, okay, is it okay if I can touch your elbow? And she says, yeah. Is it okay if I do it 10 minutes later? Is it okay if I can touch her shoulder, breasts, ass? Can I put her clothes off? Can I touch her hair? You know, you would need to ask 1,000 times for consent just because of
Yeah.
the fact that her mood changes with time. Because she might be comfortable with it now, but like 30 seconds later, it might be totally different. So if
Yeah.
make the rule that I have to ask at any point for consent, it's kind of unrealistic. And that was always like my problem with those feminist guys. I felt like it's more about tyrannizing me, you know, that I have to be afraid to touch a woman at any point.
I get
And
what you're saying. I get there's paralysis by trying to being scared to make like any type of wrong move.
I mean, men
I don't
are.
know.
Don't you think men are in that situation today? I mean, the ones that I
Yeah.
talk to, they certainly are terrified to death to touch women.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I think that men are terrified to exhibit any type of sexuality. In my personal experience, though, I think that it is unfair because the man is the one who's leading the dynamic, and he has to be the judge of that and kind of read the interaction a little bit. But in my experience, I felt like that the type of the women I dated weren't like that. And it's hard to tell because especially in the online dating world, you encounter some women who might be a little unhinged, and you just have to be very careful for red flags early on. I'm a true believer in that.
What do you mean by unhinged?
Kind of like what you say, that they might have the capacity to be volatile, to 1 minute be in agreement with something and then do a 180 and kind of, you know what I mean, kind of flip
Yeah.
on at the drop of a dime. And I'm actually developing an online dating course with another coach from Reddit, and I think it's very important early on when you're interacting with someone, whether you're meet them online, at a club, through a social event, is to just be very wary of red flags. Do they seem like they are hot and cold, or one way 1 minute, or they make these kind of grand demands, or they kind of have these extreme opinions about things, or the list can go on and on. And there's not really a set answer to that, but I really do think that men have to be vigilant and not get involved with a woman that might try to not trap is the right word, but try to put them in a precarious situation where things are being misread, and the has good intentions and he's not doing anything wrong, but then is getting accused of something that he didn't really perpetuate. If that makes any sense.
The funny thing is, I mean, I got screwed over by this mentality in a lot of cases. Only in Germany, like in South America now, bro. Like you talk to Brazilians, hey, how should you approach Brazilian women? And you're like, dude, just clap their ass, say like mamacita, go for they don't give a fuck. And the women too, like they don't care. So like obviously, like in those kind of countries, you don't have these issues. Argentina, a little bit more, becoming a little more feministic. I mean, there was this one woman, and I put my arm around her at one point after getting a couple of signals from her, and I kind of did it for fun. And she was like, "Oh, this is way too much. You have to ask me for permission." And I was like, "You know what? Have a good night. Bye." And just left.
This was it. This was in Brazil.
No, this was in Argentina. Like in Brazil, that's not
Oh,
going.
Argentina. Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. That in Argentina, it's more extreme. And I just left, and the woman was like, "You gotta leave now?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't have time for this shit. Like, if you want a guy who
You just abandoned ship.
yeah, who
Yeah.
asks you for consent, and this is my mentality with it. Like, if I interact with a woman, she can tell me that she's into that consent stuff, and I will just leave the interaction. She can do her thing, I do mine, and we both go our ways. But the thing is, what I'm trying to say really is that when I was the most aggressive with physical escalation, for example, I had the least issues. The most issues I had with women with like feminist ideologies that were trying to get me down for asking for a phone number or something like this. So I was in this like,
Well, I mean, yeah, that's
yeah, you know, I went to a like a chair, like it was like a political group for more dialogue, talk with each other instead about each other was their motto.
Is it like the different political ideologies were trying to get together and discuss things?
Yeah, but the thing is, it was like a leftist ideology thing that were excluding everything else. It's kind of funny because those guys who are like so tolerant, they just push everything out that they don't agree with. So when I was this guy who was like contra feminism, for example, and those who were like left wing guys, and that's in Germany. Like Germany is much more extreme than the USA, I think, at this point.
It's getting there. USA is getting more and more extreme, though. It's
You think so?
It's getting bad. I think so. I think that a lot of it is we're a very divided country right now, and I think a lot of I think there's more moderate people who don't really care much about the divide as the internet would have you believe. But I do think that in terms of like being a centrist country, that's gone. We're very much divided between the two parties, and you see the candidates we have now. It's really sad. I mean, like, but between Trump and Biden, I mean, we had these two are the best that we have. It's astonishing to me, but that's just like how we are right now. There's no really kind of, and the funny thing is, there's been some at least for the Republicans, there was a candidate that was a little more kind of level-headed, but I get the appeal of Trump. I do, and like because he actually is kind of revolting against this kind of political correctness and culture and identity politics that's paralyzed. I think people just want to be able to survive and live good lives and prosper. But it's just become so like mired down in these bullshit issues that we've kind of paralyzed ourselves and nothing gets done. But it's interesting that you said in over there that they have these groups where people just come together and are willing to talk about things, because
no, they're not.
Certainly haven't heard it.
They're not willing to talk about things. They actually kicked me out for asking a woman for a phone number.
And was this in Germany or is this in Argentina?
It
was in Germany.
Yeah, and I was like, guys, I mean, this is ridiculous. And they were like, yeah, but I mean, obviously we are kind of left wing. And I was like, yeah, but you always said that you're objective of political opinions. They were like, yeah, but this has boundaries. And I'm like, yeah, this is exactly always the same shit. The boundaries are the ones that you define. And this is actually the thing that we have with the left wing in Germany too, which is why I'm becoming more right wing by day, because I can see in Germany what they're doing. Like they're actually, I would say that the German democracy is at threat at this point, because what they do, for example, they pass a law. It's a transgender law, and this law, it's law in Germany now. It says that when you're talking to a transgender person and you reveal their original sex, so the biologically correct sex, with a malicious intent, then you have to pay 10,000 euros. It's like $10,000. So you're being fined with $10,000 to use biologically correct sexes. That's just the first thing. And they're moving more and more in that direction. Do like online screening with the public service now of like anti-government hate speech and eliminate all of that. So actually in Eastern Germany, the people know this because 30 years ago, it was the DDR. It was a Soviet Union installed dictatorship. And they had the same kind of laws. They had anti-government hate speech laws, and they did use Secret Service, the Stasi activity to get people down. And I feel like that's the reason. Like you have the developments in other countries too, especially Canada. Especially
that's what I was gonna say. I've heard similar laws. I don't know if it's jail. I don't know if they're putting people in jail or fining them. In Germany.
In Canada, they put a guy in jail, I think, a man, because he refused to put his daughter on puberty blockers, and he wanted to continue to call her with the original sex. We're not as extreme in Germany yet, but we're moving like fast speed in the direction. And the thing is, people always think like governments suppress the population. It's not true. The population actually carries that. Like the politics are always a reflection of how people think. And you can see that in society too, in Germany to a certain degree. There's like some left-wing ideologues who are trying to push the narrative, even if they need to go tyrannical measures. Like in my case, I do something that they don't see appropriate and I just kick you out. And I think this is why people like Donald Trump become so popular, because he's so anti all of this. I would vote for Trump at this point, because like, I mean, Joe Biden's not even like able to think anymore because he's that old, but also because the Democrats are not positioning themselves against this political correctness, which is a seriously dangerous ideology.
Yeah.
I
think the first thing I want to say is that is terrifying, that free speech is under attack. I really feel like if you're not directly threatening someone, even the most vile speech, even if you don't agree with it, should still be allowed. It's a slippery slope to suppress free speech, and this thing about misgendering people and getting fined, or I don't even know what's going on in Canada. They can get jailed or whatnot, but the freedom of speech is sacred, and I feel like that it's a very dangerous path. I don't know what it's going to look like in the United States in a few years. I hope that we don't pass any of those type of laws, but I really feel that this kind of suppression in the name of what people try to promote as being equality or supporting marginalized communities is more suppressive than anything, and it's really kind of led to a dangerous path. But I don't know if you agree with this, but I do feel like the pendulum is swinging very slowly back in the other direction, where people are starting to see this is, from what I've seen in the news of Canada, people are kind of pushing it back against us, and Trudeau and some of his policies. And he was like Mr. Squeaky Clean, can do no wrong a few years ago, and they're kind of seeing how some of the way he approaches things is really, really quite foul. But I don't know. Do you feel like things are kind of slowly? I don't know if we're going to swing back in the other direction, but I think people are largely kind of waking up to this bullshit of trying to project a certain set of morals on other people.
I don't know. I mean, the thing is that when I started going into that whole development phase, I had like a very strong conflict with those ideologies and those people. And I didn't feel like that there were a lot of people who were actually really believing in that, but there were a lot of people just staying silent and not saying something against it. And that's actually
Yeah.
most of the problem a lot of the times. Like if you look at dictatorships, how they work, it's not that people are actively, going and celebrating that dictator. They're just, no, some of them do, but a huge mass of people are silent. They don't say anything because they're afraid to
Yeah.
speak up. And I was kicked out of university three years ago because of things I said. The university just said, "Yeah, you're sexist," bye, kick me out. And
In Germany?
in France and in Germany, I did my master thesis abroad in France, which is the feminist hell. Obviously, it's coming from there.
Yeah.
You can really feel that vibe. And then the German university said, "Yeah, you're bringing bad light on us," and they kicked me. They kicked me out. I mean, I was going quite radical ways. So back then, I was
Hmm.
getting really deep into like the psychology stuff and like truth and la 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 la. And then back then, I was working with my professor's wife in a laboratory, and I had a sexual fantasy about her. And I'm like, okay, if I'm honest, I would tell her that. But then I was like, okay, I'm living in this feminist times. They're gonna kick me out. And it was like 5 days.
Yeah.
I was really thinking about it. And I came to the conclusion that I believe, even if they would kick me out, that it is a human thing to have a sexual fantasy. And it's not that big of a deal for me personally.
Yeah, but you also don't want to you want to have respect for your professor and not,
No, I did it.
just because you feel emotion. I mean, listen, I'm all for honesty, but just because you feel an emotion doesn't really also mean it's ethical to express that emotion.
Well, I told him that no, I told her, which was a mistake. I should have went to him, by the way. But anyway, I went to her and I said, no, because it's like she told him, and then the story sounded totally different than it was originally.
Okay.
But I said to her, like, look, please don't understand this wrong. I'm super embarrassed. I would never touch you because you're my professor's wife, but I had this fantasy about you. And I tried to brought those things together. Like I was feeling ashamed, feeling bad because I considered it to be wrong because she's married
Yeah.
to this guy. And because I communicated it so respectfully, I don't think that their reaction was appropriate. And on top, free speech trumps how they feel about it. In the end, I might be wrong, I might be right, but you actually by law you're not allowed to restrict that because you can't get to the truth if you restrict free speech. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And I actually want to talk to lawyers in upcoming days because I think it's against the Constitution, which says freedom of speech, no censorship. And I also feel like the message that university sent back then was, if you step out of the line, we're gonna fucking eliminate you. And
Yeah, but
yeah,
mhm.
go on.
No, I just you said you were kind of in the beginning of your journey though. How would you handle that differently nowadays?
No.
Because you would still. I think that it's impossible sometimes to not be attracted to people and whatever have fantasies about them. But I think a man who is of value has you don't need to suppress yourself, but you still need to not be driven by some of these instincts and attractions. And at the end of the day, that was another man's wife. And and if you found her attractive, that still, in my view, was inappropriate. And I mean, I don't know the whole backstory, but I mean, he has a right to still kind of take action on that, in my opinion. But
yeah, he does. But the thing goes further, right? I mean, in that story, I mean, even though I don't agree with it, that you should be able to cancel people because of that. I went to another research group, different university, and I sat down with them because I wasn't willing to take the shit again. I was like, look, I'm like this. I just got kicked out from this university. If you can't handle this sort of truth, don't fucking take me. And the professor, she was like, haha, kind of funny story. And yeah, let's take you in. And then I did the same thing again. and they kicked me out also, which then in turn the German university said, okay, you're bringing bad light on us. And then I'm at the
Yeah.
point where I say no, because I told them in advance what they can expect. I have the right to be so. Like you cannot just limit it, especially not if you agree to it in advance, like how they did, and then kick me out anyway later. So I felt like in that situation,
Yeah.
you could also see that it wasn't really about appropriateness or morals. It was more about using power and like revenge as a mean
Yeah.
to get back at me. And I don't think that those emotions are very useful, because even with controversial topics like sexuality, you need to have an open discussion, because I could say too, well, maybe this guy has an open relationship with his wife. How am I supposed to know that?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it certainly
Uh-huh.
happens 2024, no? So
Yeah.
who's the judge who makes those rules? It's not that easy to say.
Yeah. My final, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but my final thought on that is just that I think that a, a, a man who allows himself to be driven by every single one of his desires and every single one of his kind of momentary wishes about things, it shows a lack of self control, and I think self control is important. I think if we allow ourselves to be completely driven without some measure of respect for others and respect for boundaries, then we're like fucking animals. I mean, I think we need to. That's
No, but
part of being a man.
I disagree with you, because you bring speaking this out on the same level as following the instinct and actually pursuing that woman and trying to sleep with her. I didn't do that. I told her that I wouldn't touch her. I just said
Yeah.
I'm just saying what I think. I tell her what I see. I can
What
give
was
you
the purpose behind it, though? If
telling the truth, telling the truth. I didn't have any, like, I didn't have any benefits from that. I just put everything at risk. And we can make a very radical experiment where you say, let's say you work with a guy and he's a pedophile, yeah, and
yeah,
he is like thinking to himself like, oh shit, I'm a pedophile, but I need to be honest, I should tell the truth. What would be
right.
better for you, if he would come to you and tell you the truth and you can find a solution so this guy's under control, or if this guy keeps these thoughts hidden in himself and talks to your child behind your back? I would
It's
say
a
it's better.
very strange hypothetical. I don't know how I would honestly react to that. I would probably take appropriate steps if someone told me that up front, and probably take action for it. But like, one final thing is, what was the purpose behind telling her? Was there an objective, or just for honesty, right, for the sake of pure honesty, or was there an objective behind it?
I think this is the problem that people seriously don't understand today, that they see even honesty as a tool to get something. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
about it that way. I think about honesty and truth in a way that it's objective reality, and
Okay.
some of it is going to be fucked up. I don't like it. Do you think I want to have those thoughts? No, it just makes my life worse. I was actually going there and I was like, please don't have any. I was so terrified in that university because I know I was working on eggshells. It's
Yeah.
like, please don't have any interactions or sexual encounters with anyone. I don't want to get into it. But of course, I cannot fully control all of that. And then, okay, I can see those fantasies establishing in myself, and I can either hide it or tell the truth about it. I think you have those two options in pretty much every
Yeah.
social interactions you go into. And
That's fine. I mean, but like, you have to understand that there are societal structures in place. So that's fine if you feel like that always honesty is always the best policy. But there, and as you saw, there are consequences to that sometimes too. So I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but there are consequences that come with that too. So you have to kind of distinguish like how much that is important to you in your mind, and
Yeah,
rightly or
but
wrongly.
Nietzsche said that. He said that most of what man considers to be moral is just cowardness. And this is how
Hmm.
exactly how people operate. They will say to you, "Oh, I'm not saying this in that situation because I don't think it's appropriate and don't think it's the right thing to do," when in reality, they're just too afraid to say it. And
Yeah, I mean,
that's like,
if
yeah.
yeah, like I said though, that if you felt that that was appropriate for you and that worked for you at the time, then I don't, I'm not judging you for that. But there's also, like I said, there are consequences sometimes, and you have to be willing to weigh the kind of, if you're looking for emotional freedom in that moment versus what may come down. I mean, people are people. They're not going to respect always the fact that you're just being blatantly honest with them. They're going to have their own agendas, their own perspective on things, and their own way of interpreting that. So, while I agree that being honest, oh, my ear pod just fell out. Well, you can be honest with things that it, people are going to have their own agendas and their own way of interpreting things, and you have to be willing to accept consequences.
No, obviously I was accepting the consequences, but
But
the thing is,
one thing
yeah,
one thing I wanted to get back on track was, and we were talking about kind of people being afraid to say things.
yeah.
I find it, and I posted about this recently. I find it fascinating that, and I agree. I think we should support women and uplift women and all this, but it's funny that society only does those type of things when women are willing to speak to the accepted narrative. So have you seen any of the news about like J.K. Rowling and her issues that she's come up with? There's this woman that has created a billion-dollar industry, has created thousands upon thousands of jobs, but she has been raked over the coals because having a, in my view, a very balanced viewpoint of the transgender um, discussion. And she herself, who is a woman, has a right to have a piece in that conversation. But she has not, she's been crucified because she has not towed the line of what is acceptable to say in our society.
But this is a story
Um,
this is a story that's literally as old as the Bible. I mean, look at the story from the Passion story. Jesus Christ, Son of God, in theory, God himself in human body, comes to earth. He stands for nothing but good, but he's also telling the guys down there that they're kind of corrupt and they're not really following God's, teachings. They're just doing it for their own personal gain.
mhm.
So what do they do? Well, they brutally murder him. They crucify him, and
Yeah.
he comes back. So I think you actually, if you get crucified by society, it's the first indicator that you're doing the right thing. It's kind of
No,
fun.
I agree.
It's kind of
I
fun,
agree.
but you can see it
I
in the.
think, I think, I think and I've, to be perfectly honest, I would, that's why up until recently, I've been coming on camera and doing things like this and posting videos is that, um, and I had to kind of check myself, but just saying, and I don't think my advice is even really that extreme, but saying that, there are masculine and feminine energies, or that, there are certain ways women behave, there's certain ways that men behave. That stuff is like almost considered extreme nowadays. And when it's really just the truth of things. And I think that's why people are scared to kind of give their true opinion on things, because the specter of being ostracized online is so great, and it's, lives can be ruined by that. And
Yeah, it's been getting
it,
worse.
it's getting worse. So I think you're right that there is this fear of being condemned and being ostracized online and made an example of, and you really have to kind of have a fundamental strength of character and know who you are, to not get not get bogged down by that and not get defeated by it. And it's something, frankly, that I feel like I'm going to have to deal with down the road. Is just kind of accepting that there are just certain people that have made a kind of identity of self victimizing and trying to perpetuate a narrative. And if you go counter, if you say anything that runs counter to that, then they act like their identity is being attacked. And it's just something that you have to just really hold frame on and kind of be very aware of who you are and what you stand for.
Absolutely. But I'm also I'm also optimistic. I think that people come to the conclusion now that, you know, I mean, we get people getting canceled every week. For
I think people are sick of it. I think people are getting over cancel culture. I think people are just like, oh, I don't really give a fuck anymore. I mean, I don't think we're there yet, and I think we got a ways to go. But I think people are getting over cancel culture and just having everything nitpicked to death and trying to project moralism. Someone's. I don't even say it's their real morals. I think they're kind of doing it more for attention. But people who are projecting their own ideals onto other people and then saying you're going to cancel it. I think people are getting over it. And I'm optimistic too. I really do hope that people are a little more free with how they choose to express themselves.
True. Okay, man, we're running out of time, but this was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, very interesting.
We had a couple of disagreements on things, but it was to be expected. I don't get a lot of...
That's good, though. I like hearing perspectives. I would like to hear sometime we have a follow-up conversation about your dating experiences in Brazil and Argentina and the differences between that and what you experienced in Germany. That's fascinating to me. So I would like to definitely hear that one day.
That's very extreme differences. Yeah, that's where we can schedule a follow-up conversation on that. Okay, then Michael Owen, thank you so much for the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.